This is the first time I noticed this, and then give us an idea of whether it felt good to you that you saw some sort of representation, or if there was something about it that was lacking that you're like, oh, this feels worse.
I would say my first real memory of, and I'm Japanese, if you can tell by my last name, the first real representation of Japanese people in US film was the movie Gung Ho in I think 1982 or 83, something like that. If you haven't seen it, it's pretty awful. But it's about a Japanese car company that buys a US car company and then comes in and starts to run the company in Detroit like a Japanese car company, so they're doing calisthenics in the morning and all this kind of stuff. And it was really exciting at first. It was really exciting to see Japanese people being represented and some cultural aspects of things that I grew up with. If I look back on it now, I definitely give myself a facepalm. It's really pretty stereotypical and racist, but at the time, in the 80s, we didn't have representation, so I thought that was a great thing to see.
You know, for me, I grew up, I was always a little genius, a little smart, and smarty pants little kid, right? So I was a little black girl who, was always inspired by outer space. Dr. Mae Jameson went up in outer space in 1993, and for me, that was the greatest thing in the world. I was like, black women can go to outer space. And then when I was a kid, we had Sharon Sales Belton here in Minneapolis, who became the first black woman mayor of Minneapolis. And these things really, really inspired me, right? And I was reading everything I could get my hands on. I got an award in my elementary school for reading all the books in the school library. So,
Oh my heavens.
so it was hard for sometimes
Okay, not to poke holes in that, but is it a large library or small?
It was an elementary school library.
Okay, fair
so
enough.
you can take that for what you will. So I was always felt like I wasn't really ever fully understood, right? Because I was always in church. My grandfather was the pastor of a church. I was there 6 or 7 days a week. And I always came from a military family. I myself am a Marine Corps vet. But I never felt in any of these communities that I'm a part of that I was ever really seen for who I was and my uniqueness. And I just want to, if I can, super short poem that really, I think, highlights when I finally was like, okay, other people feel this too. And it's a poem by Warren Cunny. This is from my favorite book. I carry it around me wherever I go. It's American Negro Poetry. It's a collection anthology of poetry from poets from the Harlem Renaissance era. So this is called No Images by Warren Cunny. And it says, she does not know her beauty. She thinks her brown body has no glory. If she could dance naked under palm trees and see her image in the river, she would know. But there are no palm trees on the street, and dishwater gives back no images. So the only, and so for me that hit deep. And I was like, yeah, and kind of from there, just considering all the spaces that I've been in, I've always been kind of the only one of my kind. Even when I was in the Marine Corps, only 5% of the Marine Corps was female at the time. So it was generally just me, always feeling a bit isolated. But I could always turn to the poetry from the American Harlem Renaissance to really kind of guide me through, as well as some music.
And I guess my experience would be different in that, growing up, I was surrounded by people who were pretty much my own people, but I was looking at how we would be represented from the Hollywood perspective. And so then you had, in the 80s or 90s or whatever, usually Muslims, when they came in the movies, they would be terrorists and all this stuff. So you just had to kind of, get used to watching that. I don't know how many people are familiar with this old British sitcom from the 70s called Mind Your Language. So what was interesting was that we actually enjoyed watching that, although I think in this day and age, especially a lot of people from England will say, well, that was a little embarrassing, because all the international characters were pretty much caricatures of what they're from, but we it was shown on Pakistan TV, and we were kind of appreciated that, it was a Pakistani character, and he was just as cliched and caricatured as all the other characters on the show. So there was no bias against that. So,
Fair enough.
I was pretty excited when Dr. Bashir appeared on Deep Space Nine. So, even though we didn't really learn too much about his background. Other characters would usually, Picard was French, and Cisco had his background, but Bashir, never really learned too much about him, but I appreciated it.
So for me, obviously my background is, mostly disability, mental illness, and particularly through the 80s, we were lucky if we got anything at all. And like the first one I remember, particularly with regards to like neurodivergence and autism, was the movie Benny and June. And this young woman being, the ward of her older brother, and being seen as a burden like that. And it's like, as a kid, I loved the movie because I related so much to June, and being in that situation and being seen as such an oddity. But then, obviously as an adult, it's like, Jesus, what did I ever see in that movie? Other than obviously, the extremely rare representation.
But I want to co-sign what you just said. And so a few years ago, I was hosting Q&A with an actor named Antonio Fargas. And Antonio Fargas is an amazing actor, award-winning actor. He was not only in a variety of blaxploitation films, which we were very excited last year. We got to have a blaxploitation panel, which was amazing. But one of the things that I appreciated about having this conversation is that there were a number of people in the audience that were, I'll consider, a generation older than me. And them saying, back to what we're saying, bad representation or no representation, in addition to all of the work that he did in these blaxploitation films, he also played the original Huggy Bear on the original Starsky and Hutch. And so what these attendees were saying is that it was so impactful for them when they were watching on TV to be able to see Antonio Fargas as all of these characters. And even though he was quote unquote a criminal, he still was one of the heroes of the show. And the show moved forward because of him. And that really changed a lot of my perspective, because when I was growing up, again, it was looking for that representation. And very similar to what Jules was saying, like I was used to being the smart nerdy girl, kind of thing that didn't look like any of the other smart nerdy girls, if there were any nerdy girls at all. And so not only that, so I remember imprinting that I was usually imprinting if I was watching a TV show, going, oh, well, I'm the brunette. And I'm like, okay, so that's, I guess, if that's the archetype, that's what I am. And my hair doesn't do that, and I don't quite look like her, but that's her, and I'm blessed I need to wear my glasses, and I look like her. So when I got to see Uhura on Star Trek, and so not only was she there, but she was the intelligent one. She was necessary. And would not suffer fools. And yes, there were some things that I'm like, there could have been more, and like you're saying about Bashir, none of these characters are aggressively fleshed out and all those things. But it did make a difference to me, because it was what I consider like, oh no, it's somebody that I really can see, oh, I could have that job. And that was part of what made me enjoy all of these fandoms and go, no, I want to be in space, because in space, I can be that. So that made a big difference for me, and I think that that kind of colored some of the way that I look at some of these representation things. So when is that fine line, and I did see we had a card up, so I'm going to come to you in just a second. So when is that fine line when you're going, this, yes, I know that they tried, but this failed so poorly that I wish they hadn't even bothered. Do you want to start, Dirk?
Oh, God.
And if you don't want to start, if there's somebody that immediately has one, you can feel free to jump in.
Well, I have one that like immediately springs to mind, and it's one that I actually really want to talk about.
Oh, sure.
The Legion TV series. Now, the Legion TV series, it was a really interesting approach to mental illness as sort of a broad spectrum.
Can we just get a little raise of hands of people who are familiar with it and who've seen it, or like at least know the comic, the graphic novels? Okay, Dirk, can you just give a little background on what it is? Because since about 60% of the room saw it.
Okay. Well, essentially, what Legion is as a television show, it's a program that focuses on this character named David Haller. Now, at the start of the show, he is in a mental ward, and I don't remember exactly what his diagnosis was. It might have been bipolar, I don't recall off the top of my head, but he's in a mental ward, and literally in the first episode, he is rescued from this mental ward by this group of essentially kind of quasi, like, they're mutant characters, X-Men type characters, but they're not really, the spandex wearing type. These are just people trying to help. And there's a question raised with regards to his character. Is he just a super powerful mutant, or is he mentally ill and all of this is happening in his head? And it was a question that they, on purpose, avoided answering. Because it was narratively interesting, but also, especially in television, it's hard for them to commit to one thing because they're so afraid of offending this, that, or the other group. And so it was a great show, and it had really interesting coverage of mental illness, but like particularly David Haller himself is a character who is specifically known to have dissociative identity disorder.
Right.
He's had it since 1985, although even in 85, as a comic book character, they didn't want to call it that. But like the show even dabbled in it, you know, showing him having these other personae that would develop in his mind and help him out, or just kind of get
Derail things, yes.
And so it was like, on the one hand, it's like they hinted at it and they gave us the representation, but they didn't want to say it by name. And it was just frustrating.
Fair enough. I think one of the things, because I watched that show as well, and I thought that it was interesting, but because the way that they, whenever they make a mental wellness challenge a superpower, I'm kind of like, you know, because I mean, as someone who has, you know, a high supports autistic son, I get, you know, and I make a joke about it as well, but I get questioned often because people have seen things, and so they're like presuming that he must be a savant because that's all they know because they've seen TV. So everybody wants to know what the superpower is and what his thing is, and I'm like, asking me for popsicles, what does your kid do? So, but I do agree that sometimes when we don't super name it and see and flesh it out, then it gives people this idea that it's like, okay, we don't see the challenges and the humanizing factor of what it is that this person is dealing with, but we do see the, well, it's cool for you, right? And so I think that I see what you're saying. So thank you for bringing that up. So Assad, what do you think?
Yeah, I can't think of any examples where they may have tried to do like a neutral or positive character and just like handled it so badly that I felt that the character just shouldn't have been there in the first place. You know? Obviously it's different when there's an out and out villainous character that
Fair enough.
may have some issues, but yeah, I can't think of any examples.
Anyone else on the panel?
So, you know, I have a few, you know, in gaming, there are definitely a few. But I wouldn't say that rise to the level of that I wish that particular game didn't exist at all, because I do think that there is an important space for it. But I just want to highlight one game. So I'm a huge fan of Ubisoft. I know they have some of their challenges, but they're one of the few AAA developers that have put out a Native American man, a black woman, an African man, a Chinese woman on the cover as the main hero of some of their games, right? And to me, that is powerful, and it's like, thank you. But that means that they're probably going to have a few missteps along the way, right? Because they're kind of the first and only doing some of these things. And I believe when they released Assassin's Creed Liberation, so that was a game for the PSP, that at the time there were only 14 black women playable characters on consoles, and only 2 of them were like fully clothed and positive, right? I like to tell people, I was like, you know what, I'm a Marine Corps veteran and I never went into combat half naked.
Right.
Why are we not giving these female characters armor and clothes? Like, you know? Anyway, so
I like in the games, it's funny, this like they actually, the less clothes they have, the more powerful they are.
yeah,
And I'm like, why is this mechanic so backwards?
and the psychology of that in itself, right? So me just, I'm gonna get back to what I was about to talk about, but real quick little segue. So when I first started learning 3D modeling, one of my biggest problems were just the stock character models themselves that you use when you get started. On the female, I was trying to just make her chest proportional to her body, and I couldn't do it no matter how much I slid the sliders and did the things. And then what I had to realize is there was a setting that I had to go into for breast implants that was on by default. See?
Yeah.
See? And I was like, do they not expect that? Yeah, anyway, so whatever. But going back to what we're actually talking about here. Right,
But I
so
think that is part of what we're talking about, is that it's so ingrained that we don't even sometimes know how to adjust the setting.
in just the base model. So
Right.
when you're just trying to develop the character from jump, right? She already has a naturally sized proportion chest. Right, and then like when I was trying to, because learning how to make clothes was also hard, so I had to reach out to some other people who've been 3D modeling for a while who know how to make clothes that could fit the mesh, the character's like body. And they were like, we don't really like making those for women because, you know, when people try to make, are making the female characters, they blow the chest area up so big that it distorts their art on the actual design. It's ridiculous what people do. So anyway, but going back, so Assassin's Creed Liberation, right, was a game where they had a black female main character, right, and only 14 games had been done, so she was only the second character to be positive and fully clothed. And it was amazing, right, because Assassin's Creed is about going around, stalking in the shadows, you know, feeling powerful, being able to take out everybody before they even know you were there, right, that's how I play the game. So anyway, but the problem is, in the game, they force you to dress as a slave at no minimum of 5 times. You don't have a choice. If you want to progress the game, you have to dress as a slave. They depict slavery in the game, which they didn't even have to do, but it took place in New Orleans, Louisiana. But anyway, so they depict slavery in the game as people sweeping the ground and hanging clothes. So that is very problematic, right? Because Ubisoft, you know, their games are global, right? And there's lots of cultures that, you know, don't necessarily have lots of black Americans that they can just talk to or access, you know, about questions such as that. And who knows what type of history, you know, their countries have put out about, you know, Americans' brand of slavery. And so just some of the problems there that it perpetuates. But do I wish that that game didn't exist? Not necessarily, no. But do I wish Ubisoft would have asked one black person? Yes. Yes, I do wish they would have done that.
Fair enough.
You know, and
So
because they're a French company trying to tell the story of an American black woman.
So what do you think about the game, and I had to look it up real quick because I kept saying it wrong, South of Midnight, because I didn't play through part of that. So did you get a chance to play that? Did anybody else see that when that came out a few months ago?
Do not spoil it for me. I have not played it yet. All right, so do not spoil. But no, so I haven't played it yet. But I definitely look forward to jumping into that and to playing the game. I do want just a quick note before we kind of, I know I've been talking for a little bit here, is that when I released my game on PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, this is the game featuring the Pointer Sisters, who are black women. They were actually the first black women to release, or to win a country Grammy for a song they wrote called Fairy Tale in 1975. It's amazing. But that'll be the first game released by a black woman on PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo. Wow. And it's like... So that right there helps improve representation, right? But it's so hard because the barrier to entry is so high, right? Because of the amount of funding that you need to actually bring the quality of game to consoles that gamers appreciate and are looking for.
Do you find that since there's not enough representation in a lot of these genres, that you don't get the ability to fail or do poorly? It has to crush it every time.
Basically, yeah, right. So we have like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, right? And that kind of is like you can put that on a poster board of the problem, right? Because it depicts black people, like outside of sports games, right? We have only 3% of the playable characters in video games are black, native, or Hispanic. Right? And then outside of sports games, it gets even smaller. And the depiction is of gangsters, mobsters, drug dealers, and prostitutes. And even if they want to make us a hero, they make us a reformed gangster, a reformed drug dealer, or something like that.
Agreed.
We can never just be purely good. Right? And of the games where we're just purely good, we have Spider-Man Miles Morales.
Yep.
And then maybe you have Assassin's Creed Origins, because Bayek of Siwa is of sorts a sheriff, but he is still killing a lot of people, right? But he is, you know, people seem to look up to him in the community. But that's about it, right? And so that in itself is a huge problem. 80% of black youth play video games, right? Over 70% of black youth across the globe, you know, play some form of video game. And this is the image that we're constantly putting out there of black people to the black community and to all other communities, right? And that's why we have so many problems still with people acting on stereotypes, because that's all we're seeing in the media, that's all we're playing when we're playing these video games. It's constantly perpetuating the negative stereotype of the darker your skin, the worse of a person you are.
I think that's why we have situations sometimes where it's like, even though your brain said tase, your hand said gun. Is in situations like that, unfortunately.
Right. Because it's kind of like it's a consistent conditioning or training. like one of my Marine Corps commanders would always say, Marines don't rise to the occasion, we default to our level of training.
Okay.
And that's so true for so many of us. When we have that flight or fight reaction in the moment, we default to what's been conditioned in our mind.
Thank you very much, Jules. So Laura, do you have anything to add? And I did see a couple of hands that were up, so I'll come to you as well. So Laura, do you have anything that you want to chime in with right now?
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you're, talking about, like, especially thinking about stereotypes, is that, like, especially Asians are the model minority, right? Like, there's, people just act, if more immigrants just acting more like the Asians, you'd be okay. It's just as negative of a stereotype, it's just as negatively impactful, especially for those, like, I was trying to think of an example of like a movie or TV show that tried to, most of the stereotypes that we see are very poor, right? So we've got, like, I know The Big Bang Theory had Raj, that was really poor, like, stereotype Indian people. We've had really poor stereotypes of East Asians in a lot of things. Specifically, like, we're either depicted as kung fu masters, we don't all know martial arts, sorry, I hate to break it to you, or like somehow like the nerdy smart person, which is really negatively impactful for those people, those Asians that are not like science and math minded. Like that's a really like awful place to be, is that everybody assumes that you're good at math and science and you're not. But also, like, I was trying to think of, we're seeing more representation of Asian women in movies and TV, but they're always sidekicks. So, like, why is it that we're only good enough to be the side character or the supporting character, but we're not actually good enough to have our own stories? And I think that's the forefront of my mind. We're seeing more, like, Star Wars has had a few, Fennec Shand was probably one of the more recent ones, where in Book of Boba Fett, and then, Shang-Chi came out, again, but where's the sequel to Shang-Chi? We haven't seen it, because people don't want to, it's like, and then Awkwafina is a sidekick, and like, it's really sad to see. Like, I want to be supportive of them, and I go see all these movies, and I spend money on these movies that have representation of Asian people, but there's no follow-up. Like, Crazy Rich Asians was like a massive film. Where's the sequel to that? There's 3 books in that series. There's no sequel to it anywhere. So, we have to kind of think about, I want to think about, like, what's going on there. Is it that these movies are not making money? They're making money. They're just not making, like, nobody wants to invest, we already did an Asian movie, so we're not going to do another one. Or we already have an Asian character here, so we're not going to do another one. It's like, and I know that, like, other like minorities especially have had like the same thing happen. So how do we get out of this cycle of like moving from sidekick or negative stereotype into main character, into more realistic type characters that are interesting, that are not just defined by their race too. So that's the other thing I'd like to see.
All right, friends, I did see a couple of cards, so okay, we're gonna okay, go ahead, friend. What did you have?
Jules kind of made me think of stuff, and I was thinking about custom characters. So games like Mass Effect or Skyrim, where you can choose what race or whatever you might be, and approaches for game writers, or when there's in-world stereotypes, right? Like, I'm playing Skyrim as a Khaishgi, and I'm going this, like, battle mage path. I'm not picking up rogue skills, I'm not lock-picking, like, I'm trying to do, like...
Steering away from the stereotype.
Right. But, if I would have to, like, write my own mod to, give people that acknowledgement of, like, you're following through and bucking stereotypes, and this is how it's changing the world that you're around. Because we see that in our world. Like, we see examples of that kind of positivity, but we don't see it reflected in these sort of open world environments. And so I was just wondering if that is probably a technique that you would, kind of endorse, like, your other approaches to try to enriching the open world type custom character kind of playthroughs.
Go ahead, Jules.
Okay, cool. I was like, I got so much to say, but
Yeah.
I paused.
We were all like, we all just parted the sea and let you go.
So I both love it, and they still have work to do, right? So I love it because, yes, it increases your ability to put yourself in the game, right? Like, so I have one of my best friends, her and I, we're both black women, we both love the game. When we want to play the same game, we often have to fight over if there is a black woman character who gets to play as her, because there's usually only one, right? And then sometimes there's only one that maybe could be black, right? So then we have to fight over who gets to play her. And why do I have to do that, right? Why? It's frustrating. And so I do appreciate the custom character creators for that reason. My beef with them, okay, because especially for some Bethesda games, especially back in the day, and even for like Dragon Age and things like that, it was hard for me to make a character using the custom creator that matched my skin type. For whatever reason, the black characters, the skin type was like orange, or it was just weird and not natural. And so like they really had some work to do so I can, can I just get a mocha caramel? Like, so I wanted more options to really make myself, but they were kind of limiting you when the black characters, when it came to being able to match a skin color that's natural. The other part of it, and it's something that I worked really hard on when I first learned 3D modeling, is the hair. Right, so if you have any type of kink or curl, you are not about to get your hair correct in your game. And for many of us, your hairstyle is such a big part of your expression that you just don't want some straight girl ponytail. Okay, like we want to have a hot girl summer with our, with the frills, with whatever we want to do.
Or that flowy locks thing. I'm like, how long? I'm like just pretending. It's not doing that.
Yeah,
and
so
if the wind blows it, it's gonna stay where the wind blew it. And so that's where it is now.
It was a game like The Outer World, and then there was another one that was like it's a technique, I forget, but there's some character creators that really put work into the hairstyles so that we can do a better job of getting our hairs in there so we can really make ourselves and see ourselves. And so that's just one thing to add. And then also those game worlds, right? So sometimes you have a game world, yes, you can make yourself, but if you make yourself maybe as me, as a black woman character, it's not like the game then kind of customizes it to you for your experiences and kind of makes the game shaped around who you've now decided you want to be. So there's still space for those single player games or those immersive experiences that shape the world around the character. So like for instance, when you're Bayek of Siwa, it's taking place in ancient Egypt where you have black Egyptians, you have the Greek conquerors, and you have the Romans who are now coming over to conquer the Greeks. And it actually shows you how that played out, right, on this now multicultural society where now the Greeks who were like dominating, right, the Egyptians were now being dominated, and how they were all taking that in that time of the society, and like it made it much more powerful in the game because it was kind of built around that time period in Bayek and his experiences.
Yes, and then I'll come to you next.
Just really quick, on black-haired video games, there's an NPR article that literally came out earlier on March that talked about a new style of animation for kinky black hair that they're calling, what did it say?
I'm like, yes.
I just had it. Phase locking.
Okay.
A new animation technique that maps to black hairstyles in like a much more accurate way.
I love
That's
that.
really cool.
Exactly. Thank you for sharing
Thank you.
that. I'm
Phase
glad they called
locking.
it phase locking. That sounds dope. If they had called it like 4C or something, I'd be like, come on, try harder. Try harder. Yes, friend.
So, I'm asexual, and for the most part, when the media bothers to acknowledge us, which most of it doesn't, they treat us relatively well, but I've yet to see like a true representation of my experience, say, in a romantic relationship. I'm just wondering, you just be satisfied with what you get, or should you want more?
We should absolutely want more.
And demand more.
You should always want more. Now, it might take challenges and communication to get there. I encourage going, well, if you don't ask, you don't get. And it's finding the right people to ask. And then once you start getting, you have to vote with your dollars and go, I appreciated that. And what I try to remind people is that, trolls got plenty of time to say something sucks. when you like a thing or it's moving in the right direction, we have to spend just as much time telling people that we like it. Otherwise, because we don't. Like, we'll sit there and say her DoorDash driver was terrible, but are you really actually going, you know what, this was really good, or I think you should do more of that. And we don't, then it looks like, at best, that we are just mediocre about the whole thing, so then they don't have a reason to do more. And especially in our world of 48-hour news cycles and things change, they'll move on to the next thing immediately if we don't say, no, wait, stop. I liked this and here's why.
Or, like I was saying in the writing fan fiction panel last night, be the change you want to see in the world. If you want it, you gotta put it out there.
That's my girlfriend.
I think we also need some really strong allies too. Like, I mean, one of the things that I've noticed is like, just in the last like the 3 Star Wars movies that came out, where the 2 actors that got bullied the most online were the black actor and the Asian actor, right? So it is everybody's job to go into forums and call people out on their crap when they're starting to spew this, pretty racist commentary on the actors that are being cast in those movies. The reason that more actors of color are not being cast in roles, in large roles, is because the money people are looking online at what the feedback is. The feedback is a lot of negative because people who want to be frankly racist assholes are going to go online and be racist assholes, and their voice is going to be heard a lot more than the people who are not.
And I think we have to remind ourselves that there are some people who would rather burn a fandom to the ground than allow it to look like people who don't look like them. And so it's good to remember that if you want other representation, they will literally just go back in my day and have that thing go away. And go, isn't it okay that there's a video game for me too? And you're like, nah. They're like, all the video games have to be like this, only me, because identity, they've identified themselves as what a gamer is supposed to be. And so that means that anybody else, none of their opinions are mattering. So you have to be able to go like, no, I'm here too. And I don't think we do that sometimes. And some of it we do, and I totally understand this. Not everybody needs to be the front of the line. I understand that sometimes, especially if we're in one of the the global majority positions or in all that stuff, from safety positions, there's a reason why you don't need to be the first one out there sometimes. So I understand. So I'm not encouraging everybody to put themselves in harm's way. But there are other ways that you can sit there and go, no, I'm important as well, because you are, so are your perspectives.
And just to give a couple examples, so like, we know the game Concord, Prof. Brown is also one of the guests of honor here this week who worked really hard on that game. And that was one that the trolls shut down, right? Because how dare there be characters who are different, who are trans, or different things like that. And just to speak on things that we can support right now when it comes on the issue of sexuality that he brought up, is we have the awesome Blue-Eyed Samurai anime on Netflix, where that's basically a female samurai who basically dresses herself as a male samurai and goes out, and fights. And then there's also, I can't remember if it's called The University, but it's in the boys' universe. And it takes place at the college in the boys' universe. And there's a character named Jordan who goes between female and male and has different powers based upon if they're in male form or female form. Mm-hmm. So I think we should support, specifically support, right, those characters and let them know that, hey, we are watching this because we enjoy this character and thank you for including them.
Anything else from the audience right now? Yes, Brent.
So, for me personally, I mean, obviously white man, but queerness, geek, generally I like seeing representation, even if it's a bit flawed, because at least it's there. But then I think about like the TV protests for queerness, where a lot of Americans, their only image of queer people was these very negative portrayals on TV. And I just, in this panel, I just keep thinking about that, like, where's that line where we say the negative portrayal is bad because it's falsely educating people to think something's not true of a group?
Okay, as everybody breathes, I'll use the Dave Chappelle example. And I think that sometimes, like, there were people that, the reason why, and if we all remember, like, people were loving the Chappelle show, but, he got to the point, and don't get me wrong, Dave does a lot of problematic stuff now, so I'm talking about back before he dug himself a hole and chose to double down on it, so I'm gonna go back in the day. I'm all like, you can do other okay, you chose that, all right, choices were made. But if we look at the reasoning why he sunset that show at the time that he sunset the show is because people didn't understand the irony and they were using it as real life. And Chris Rock has said the same thing about some of his bits, where people no longer were able to sit there and go, oh, they were using it as gospel and using it as canon to then go and vilify other human beings, so they decided to stop doing that. And so that's when, personally, I go, that's when it needs to change. You know, we need to update it because there are people that are looking for reasons to double down on that expectation. And so if we have so much of that, and hopefully we encourage people to do better so that they can be the best. And that's when I go, yeah, don't even, it wasn't that you tried, because I also don't give people as much credit for trying and failing in certain situations. I do think that sometimes it's intentional that they've decided that this is the character that's going to be the foil for this, and they're leaning into that stereotype because they've decided that their audience wants that stereotype to be true. So I think there's a difference between trying for representation that's authentic and failing and being intentionally problematic, because they're like, you know, sometimes you hear it as voiced as back in my day, or we're just making jokes, everybody understands it, oh, the actor thought it was fine, you know, like lots of those reasons, when it's like, no, as you said, no, it's a problem and we're doubling down on the problem. So panelists, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I gotta back up Dave Chappelle a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Because I appreciate his approach to art and really using art in his way as to push some very important conversations that we need to have, maybe surrounding issues and demographics of people that we need to have them about. You know, I think, I'm just speaking as a black person in the black community and as a black member of the LGBT community, it's very difficult often because of how much religion is a part of, you know, the black community that I'm a part of, you know, and when you stand out from that, you know, trying to educate people and remind people that Jesus is about transformative love, not the condemnation of people. And I just think there's so many people in my community that do have some homophobia that they maybe don't realize in working through and believing that, you know, they're following what, you know, the Bible says, but they're doing so in a way that are, if that is true, then they're doing so though in a way that is causing so much more harm that I believe was ever intended. So, but that's a whole other conversation. But I appreciate Dave Chappelle for pushing those conversations in spaces of people that may not otherwise be so willing to have them, even though, you know, as an artist, he's taking, you know, a hit as a result.
And I want to give one counter to that because I know that we need to move on, and so I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm just saying this from the perspective of a comedian as well. That I think sometimes when Dave Chappelle is is such a brilliant writer that when we get to certain things, and he's already covered certain territory on certain things, and then going back into it when we're back into that. So that's what I'm talking about, is some of that things where I'm like, okay, it's cool that you started this conversation, but now when you keep going back to it, what I find in the comedy community is now all these baby comedians think they could talk about it as well, and they're terrible at it. And so I'm like, you're not him, you know, like you're not any of these people. You're not Bill Burr, you're not any of these people, but now they think they have license to do it because they saw one person model it, and now it's just making it worse. So I appreciate what you're saying. And so I don't want anybody to think that I'm like, oh, everything he said was terrible. I'm like, yeah, but he could have put a comma. Is what I was trying to get at. So I get what you're saying.
A bit more responsible.
Yeah, so I get what you're saying. So, yes, our friend, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, I don't know if it quite completely relates to the point, but I think it's just important that you need to have different sorts of representation for any sort of like minority group. So like, maybe as an example, I would say like a show like 24 would often be described as Islamophobic, but I actually kind of disagreed because I thought that through the different seasons of 24 you had villains who were Muslim, but you also had a lot of good guys who were Muslims. So I mean, it's not like I'm saying, I would never say that, you know, you should never have a Muslim as the bad guy. I would not say that at all. But I think you also need to have different sorts of people in the same group to show that there's a wide spectrum of people.
Absolutely, we're not a monolith.
Absolutely, yes. Okay, we'll come to Orange, and then we're going to go to the back, and then I see you with your hand up, so come to you after that. So yes.
I was going to say, you know, obviously I was raised mostly white in a more diverse environment in the Midwest. I came here, but one of the big things I've noticed is I can really see the default setting when I talk to people here. The white, heterosexual, Christian, normative, like baseline, and people will present their ideas about something because it's simply different. It makes them uncomfortable. And instead of sitting with that and having a conversation about it, they just kind of automatically say, well, I don't like it, and I would rather it be whatever I visualize, right? Especially when we talk about a book turning into a movie or a show. If it's a book, sometimes there is no description that fits a particular ethnic background, particularly in fantasy or sci-fi, but people have an image in their head, which often is whatever they see the default as. And if you're talking to white people, often that is a white character, and they will immediately say, I didn't really like that they chose that actor or actress. Okay, why? And then they don't necessarily have a concrete thing to say after that. And I think it is important if you like the way an actor portrays something, no matter their background, if you like how they did that character, to just speak up in those moments and be like, I actually really like the way they portrayed it. Is it different in some ways? Sure, but every portrayal is. It's not necessarily about, oh, that character should be white, like Hamilton the musical. Yes, we know those historical figures had different backgrounds, but did it change the enjoyment of the overall performance? Yeah, but I think in good ways that brought a lot of good to it.
Denis Villeneuve in the Dune films portrayed that really well, I thought.
I agree.
Actually giving us like Fremen who are accurate to
And I think Frank
where that idea came from, right?
Yes, in the back, please, with the circle. Oh, 1 second, right behind you, then we're gonna come to, if I just here's what I do. Circle, hand, then you in the hat. Yes, so thank you very much, friend. Yes.
What is your advice for allyship for views that differ from your own? Or viewpoints that differ from your own?
So you're saying a person outside of your community who's making something that differs from the viewpoint of the community, or what are you saying?
So, like, what advice would you have for someone who wants to be an ally of a certain cause, but doesn't fit into that cause?
I think there's a difference, and this is trite now, but I think there's a difference between being an ally, which we've used that word to the point that it's now a flat tire, and being an accomplice. And being an accomplice means that you're in it with me. And it's you figuring out, and being an accomplice goes back to our previous person statement, where it's allowing yourself to be uncomfortable in a situation. Because the ally will go, okay, that's cool and it sucks for them and I'm sorry about that, but if you're still comfortable, you're still okay. But if you're putting yourself in the position of being uncomfortable as well, that I think actually makes a good accomplice in us doing this, is going, oh wait, why do I feel uncomfortable in this situation? Oh, because as they mentioned, I'm used to it mirroring what I look like, and being able to ask yourself those questions and figure out, why don't I feel comfortable in this situation and what can I do to change it? And go, oh, I think that, one of the things of being somebody that comes from the global majority and all of this stuff, I got very comfortable with imagining myself into worlds that didn't necessarily look like me, but I still know what it would be like if I was in the Spider-Man universe. I still know what it would be like if I hung out in Doctor Who. And I think that that's putting yourself in that same position, because I remember talking to a friend who hated Black Panther because White Wolf wasn't in it enough. And I'm like, for real, dude, for real.
And I definitely think that just from a pure media consumption point of view, one of the best things that you can do is to just seek out things that don't necessarily reflect your lived experience and your worldview. Branch out, go out of your way to find these things and be like, okay, so I don't really relate to this, but this is giving me a chance to see into a world that is nothing like mine.
Yeah, when I was in seminary, I actually did a semester on the doctrine of Satan, and I went out and I interviewed 2 Satanists. Because I was like, you know what? Yeah, I mean, here I am in seminary, only Christians have been telling me about what Satanists believe. So yeah, why don't I just go ask a Satanist what do you actually believe?
Right.
And can you walk me through it? And that's exactly what I did. And it was so eye-opening, and it was so enjoyable, right? And they even had a good time. They were like, man, Christians never just sit down and talk to me and actually listen to me, and here you are taking all these copious notes. And I was like, yeah, right? Because it's so different, and it's just so brings it so much more to life when you're actually just asking a member of that community, to explain a few things to you if they're willing to sit down and talk with you. I think most humans will, right? If you have questions about something that they're passionate about and that they really enjoy that you may not know, they'll talk you through it. If there's some issues that you see that they're facing and you want to know how you can best help, just go to some of the community meetings and just sit there and be around and just be available, when you needed to help with something.
Yeah, I
We
think
have
a lot of.
I'm sorry, Laura, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think a lot of people don't really always understand or see that, like their viewpoint is problematic or like, problematic, I guess is the best word for it. If you start asking why, or if you start asking people kind of like where that comes from, sometimes it gets them to see that their viewpoint is problematic. Sometimes it doesn't, but like, I found that a lot of people, especially as a white passing person, like people will open up to me in ways they shouldn't. And a lot of times it's like, okay, so why do you think Japanese people are weird sexually? Oh, because you only ever see the culture from like anime point of view, or like what you hear about like underwear vending machines on the street in Japan. Like there's just all kinds of things where it's like, yeah, there's some weird shit.
I've seen enough hentai to know where this is going.
Yeah, but at the same time, like that's not like, just like everywhere in the United States, it's not the same everywhere, right? It's not the same. That's a stereotype, just the same as everything else. And so when you start asking people like where an idea came from or what they saw that made things feel that, or made them feel that way, that can help them realize that what they're seeing is stereotypical or not accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And before I pull it away, Assad, did I miss you? Did you have anything you wanted to add on that particular topic before I go back to the audience?
No, I think as everybody said, you probably just need to talk to the people of any community that you want to ally yourself with.
Thank you. Okay, our friend that had your hand up right here, yes, please.
Hi. Kind of right in line with what you were just talking about, asking a member of the community, but on the other hand, how do you feel about when a member of your own, or a member of whichever community you belong to gets it wrong, when they're trying to represent? What exactly do you think, how does that reflect on the community?
Especially in Asian culture, because like there's dozens of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not all the same, and individuals are not the same either. So it's the same idea of being compassionate towards people, like that. What they might be doing might be a lived experience they have, and it's not necessarily the next person's lived experience. My lived experience is very different from like my cousins. My cousins live in Japan. They grew up Japanese. They're bilingual. I'm not. I grew up in the United States. Like, we have very different ideas of what being Japanese is. So, I mean, I would say, like, getting it wrong might be like more of a label for it that has some there's some background there that somebody thinks that either maybe they're getting into their own culture and they were not, they didn't grow up in it, like me, right? Like, I might get some stuff wrong about Japan because I didn't grow up there. But I have a lived experience where I experienced certain things that are of my culture that came from my father growing up in the United States. So it's not necessarily wrong, it's just different, right? Like, if it's problematic, I would say, like, there's probably other people in the community that could step in and probably help them, like, understand why something is problematic, but it's just I think it's just, a lot of that is just a different lived experience for people.
Yeah, cultural comedy is extremely nuanced, right? And nothing is a monolith when it comes to culture and people and just personalities and things of that nature. And so there's really space for all different perspectives, even if some maybe skew towards an area where we kind of side-eye. I know, like, a few years ago there was a big maybe debate about Tyler Perry and Spike Lee, and then the different ways in their approaches to storytelling, and the different stories that they want to tell, and the different parts, I guess, of the Black experience that they want to share. And I believe that there's space for all of that, right? And I believe that there's space for even more, right? All that's telling is that we need more imaginations, we need more positions, we need more people of color sharing stories, in film, in television, and just in media in general. One thing that I like to talk about is the doll test from the 1940s, where we gave little black girls a black doll and a white doll. And we said, which doll is the good doll, the pretty doll, the smart doll? And the little girls would point to the white doll. They said, which is the bad, the ugly, the stupid? They point to the black doll. And they repeated that test in 2015 with little kids of all different races to the exact same results, which showed that despite our knowledge that those types of stereotypes are very difficult and damaging, that we are still putting that out there. Like, we haven't yet decided as a society that we're going to be intentional about not teaching, subconsciously, that the darker your skin, the worse you are, and the more of a villain that you are. And we do have to be intentional about attacking that and putting out intentionally more positive images and just more of the imagination. Like I said, when you have only less than 3%, right, of the characters being people of color, but almost every representation being negative, that definitely impacts the psyche as you're repeating that over and over and over again. And so we have to wash that out with more positive and just good images. And we almost need to build up also an army of change makers, right? An army of, underrepresented kids, right, who understand now and who have the skills to put their own imaginations out there in these different spaces. So that's just a plug for my program, where we teach 10th, 11th, and 12th graders how to develop console video games, so that by the time they graduate our program at age 18, that they're ready for entry-level careers. And we've just helped diversify the workspace. And now they can actually have the power to tell their own stories and bring their imaginations to life. Right? So it's not just my imagination, it's hopefully hundreds and thousands of people sharing their imaginations, and hopefully that drowns out the bad representation.
Yeah, I'd agree. You probably have to beware of anybody who presented themselves as, I'm the expert on this culture or this representation. I mean, if somebody came to me as a consult, I could give, again, my experience, this is what I know. But what I know may not of your characters, like from the northwest part of Pakistan, I probably couldn't help you too much. And my approach is probably more liberal than a lot of people. In my family, none of the women ever wore like headscarves or anything like that. But you might talk to somebody else as a consultant and they would say, hey, your character is a Muslim woman, she has to wear a headscarf. So,
just from my, admittedly limited experience, when it comes to particularly the depiction of mental illness in various media, I have eternal hatred for the movie Split and how it treated people with dissociative identity disorder. I still haven't seen it, and I never will. But just hearing about that movie and then hearing that they deliberately did not talk to anyone within the community, any psychologists, anything like that, and they just threw that out there, it's like, what were you even hoping to accomplish here? And just like the unrepentant ignorance of it. And it's just a general do better because we deserve better kind of thing.
Well, we are coming up close to time, so we're going to do one more question in the room. So I think that our friend in the hat, do you want to cede your time? Are we good? Okay, so I think the next card I saw was our friend over here with the pink card. That's going to be our final question in the room tonight. But we will, as we close, make sure you can find all of us on the panel. So if you have a follow-up question, you'll be able to see us at the con. So thank you. Sorry, they're going to have to cut us off. So go ahead, friend.
What advice do you have for writing and portraying characters from a community that you are not part of?
But everybody look at me first.
You always start with the why.
I will do that. I answered this question last year, so I have an answer, but I'd like our panelists to go ahead.
You always start with the why. It's always the why am I telling this story, right? Like what, and then when you're talking about the why am I telling the story, if it's a person of a different culture, then it's the am I the right person to tell that particular story, right? And if the answer to those is yes, that you're telling the story, right, that you're passionate about telling, and this is the best way for you to tell that story, then I say go forth and conquer. But make sure you do, right, bring in and talk to, people of that community, right, before you release that, and, just kind of double check some things. But yeah, but if you really feel this is the story that is just burning within me, kind of like when the prophet Jeremiah said there's a fire shut up in his bones, right? When you feel that fire shut up in your bones, right, and this is the story, and this is the avenue, and you are the person, and you have to get it out, then you have to get that out. But do please loop in people from that community.
And I do agree, and I think this kind of dovetails from my particular belief back to our friend that was saying, how do I be a good ally or accomplice? I don't necessarily encourage everyone who's an author to go, well, you have to write this perspective. Like your perspective is still your perspective. So back to what Jules said is, are you writing these characters because you're like, I looked at my characters and the makeup of them do not fit the world that I'm making? Then I encourage you to use your imagination and figure out how that goes. But then, as one of our previous attendees mentioned, there's sometimes that the character doesn't have to be anything. So you can also leave that up to the reader's imagination in some situations. So you might be able to dance that line in a couple of different ways to do it. But if you're throwing in a character because you're like, I'd feel like I was a jerk if I didn't throw in a character, then maybe that's not the right road to take sometimes.
Sorry, I was distracted. I didn't catch the question.
They were asking if you're writing, and why don't I let you go ahead and rephrase the question? I'll let you do it yourself since you are here. I don't need to speak for you. So go ahead.
The question was if you have any advice for writing characters who are from a community that you are.
Talk to people if you can. If you have any friends or any people that you can reach out to, just to get a firmer understanding of that community, but also don't let that necessarily limit you. Do the best you can with your own understanding. Do research and do what you can, but don't let it hold you back from even trying.
So as we wrap up, I'll go ahead and start down with Laura, if you'd like to remind everybody where else they can see you during this con.
I think I have one more panel tonight at 11:30 on coffee. Caffeine. You can see me there, but I'm around. Great time. Yeah.
So after this, I believe at 5 p.m., I'll be down signing for a meet and greet. So please come down. I would love to take pictures with you. I would love to show you some of my awesome Afrofuturistic art and sign it for you. And just be awesome. I think there's one later tonight at 11:30. So that should be pretty dope too.
I've got one panel tomorrow at 12:30 on censorship and at 3:30 on Galaxy Quest.
All right, next place you're actually going to see me is actually in the Masquerade tonight.
Lovely.
I decided to go for it again. And then after that, I'm going to be in the SCP Foundation radio play, Welcome to the Ethics Committee.
Wonderful. And I will be leading up our perimenopause and menopause panel this evening at 8:30 p.m. So everybody bring your hot flashes. We'd love to see that. Thank you all for joining us. Please make sure you enjoy yourself the rest of the time. Thank you to our panelists. We appreciate all of